free-for-all. You're on your own, soldier.
Alright, hello everybody and welcome to the Free For All podcast. My name is Tom and I'm here with my buddy Chase, and let's just get down to it. For our first episode today, we thought we would talk about the whole COVID-19 crisis and its implications and everything that went on in 2020. So we'll have Chase start out here. He actually had COVID, and we'll let him speak as to what his situation was and how he got through it and what exactly went down.
Yeah, so, great to be here. I guess my whole experience with COVID was really weird and definitely scary at some points. I'll start, I guess, back, before I got COVID. The whole crisis started back like late February, and everything carried over into March, obviously, and it basically came down to cities were going to start shutting down. All restaurants were going to close, bars were going to close, nightclubs were going to close. Nobody was going to be able to do anything. So, I guess I was probably pretty irresponsible going into lockdowns. Everybody was kind of making excuses to leave their house, and when stuff started to open back up, we got pretty careless, and me and my girlfriend would go out to eat all the time, go out to breweries and different restaurants and everything, and I ended up getting COVID, towards, the end of June and everything. I got the basic symptoms and everything, and I thought I was going to be okay. Obviously, nobody ever thinks they're going to get anything the worst. And what ended up happening was I got all the basic symptoms the first week, and then it cranked it up to 10 the second week, and I had 105 fever. At the end of week 2, I ended up feeling so bad that I went to the hospital in downtown, and they checked me into a room and basically said that I was presenting COVID symptoms and everything, so that's what they were going to monitor me for. And then I tested negative 3 different times over the course of 3 days, so they released me. On day 4, I went home. I started to feel a little bit better week 3, and then week 3 it's like I got run over by a bus. I took a shower one night and came back into my room and could barely breathe, and I was starting to get dizzy, felt like I was going to faint. I couldn't stand up, and my dad kind of told me, he was just like, we're going to take you to the ER. I don't know what else to do and everything. And it got to the ER, and my oxygen saturation was 63%. And they get me into an ER room. I've got nurses running around everywhere. I can't even talk because I can't breathe. And these doctors were just like, if your oxygen saturation drops any lower, we're putting you on a ventilator and putting you on life support. And, at this point, with how little we know the virus, like, it doesn't look good for you. And so that was a very, very sobering feeling. I lasted in the ER. They were able to get my oxygen saturation levels up, and they transferred me into the ICU, and I sat in the ICU for about 8 days until they released me. My oxygen saturation, I was still desatting down to about 85, but that was the threshold that they felt it was okay to release me. So I got released. Went home, and then just began the long recovery process, having to relearn how to walk properly and keep my balance, to trying to get cardio mixed in, and just walk around and move, because my body had shut down for so long. From the time that I caught COVID to the time that I got released from the ICU was about a month. So it was definitely, my body shut down for a literal month, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. So I had to relearn how to walk, and do a bunch of basic things that that normal people take for granted and everything. And I definitely think that um, through the recovery process and everything, I would, I felt that I had put myself in that situation, that I was irresponsible and didn't wear a mask and wasn't paying attention to the safety rules and everything that were laid out. And so I kind of had to rethink what I was doing. And while I think wearing masks and everything is responsible in certain cases, the government's just gone absolutely wild with this whole pandemic and the way that it's affecting people. Because while I may have been affected by the virus in a literal sense, that I caught it and it could have killed me, it's affected people that haven't even gotten the virus either. And I think that's kind of what we were wanting to talk about today is, what about these people that haven't been affected by the virus, but at the same time, all these government regulations are killing businesses and ruining people's livelihoods. People are foreclosing on their houses and defaulting on debt and all these crazy different things because of what the government's doing.
Yeah, and yeah, it's pretty crazy what the response has been, and it begs the question: what's worse, the response or the actual disease itself? Obviously, some people have really bad, and really bad experiences like you did, and other people it's just a cold or it's literally nothing and they're asymptomatic. So it's pretty wild, and there's just a lot going on at this point that I feel is irreversible.
Um, I mean, so at the beginning of the pandemic, this was before I caught it. Um, one of the first things that came out, everybody obviously started freaking out because the news started reporting, oh, there's a new virus or whatever that's infecting millions of people, and all these other countries, obviously that had this pandemic going on before us or whatever, or we thought it was isolated to those countries. We find out that it's in the United States, and we start all freaking out. Everybody's panic buying toilet paper and anything that they can get their hands on at grocery stores. I know there are a lot of different local breweries that shut down production of alcohol or whatever to make hand sanitizer because it wasn't available in stores. Just had all these crazy things happening, and everybody was kind of, it was another bash point for everybody to go in on Trump. And everybody was like, oh, he could have, he needs to close the country, he needs to do all these other things and everything to shield us from this virus spreading and everything. And so, what does Trump do? It's like a week later, after everybody starts demanding this, that's exactly what he does. He closes the country, says we're shutting our borders, no foreign travelers are allowed in the United States. If there are foreign travelers already there, they're going to have to shelter in place. They're going to have to figure something out because we're not letting them back out. Our borders are shut. And what did the leftists decide to do? They decided to call him a xenophobe. And you can't have your cake and eat it too. Sometimes, you can't sit there and demand that he shield you from the virus and think of solutions to help prevent this from spreading, and when he comes up with a solution you take a dump on the solution. And you can't do that. It's one or the other. He either has to shut the borders and keep the virus from spreading, or he keeps the borders open, allows foreign travel and potentially more infections. And the mainstream media criticized him for not doing enough, and then you turn around and several world leaders are praising him for closing the country when he did, saying that there were several other countries that still hadn't done what Trump did or whatever when they should have and everything. And it was only after Trump closed our country that everybody else decided that they were going to start closing too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of people that just like to complain about what other people do, and my issue is that they just never have solutions. And yeah, just an example for that. Biden, when they were doing all the debates and stuff, he just kept blaming Trump. I mean, even outside the debates on the campaign trail and everything, he just kept blaming Trump, saying he would do better. But all he would do is say, "Oh, 300,000 deaths, 300,000 deaths." Well, I mean, he never said that he would have any different policy. Like, all the blue states are doing exactly what they would want them to do. It's what Biden would want them to do. Just do complete shutdown, mask mandates, all this other stuff. And I mean, even living in Florida, which is a predominantly red state. I mean, we live in a blue county, but there are mask mandates. So I just don't know what Biden would have done better. I mean, they're just trying to, bitch and complain and say that they're amazing and Trump is terrible and go, along with the mainstream media. I mean, they're all in cahoots basically. So, I mean, who knows if he would have done better? I mean, who knows exactly what, certain other countries have that have lower rates of infection have that we don't. I mean, that's a problem. People aren't comparing ourselves to different countries and what different countries have done. They just want to, focus on the death number here and complain and say it's all Trump's fault, basically.
No, and see, another thing that we found out is after these lockdowns started, everybody started asking the question, well, okay, like, how did it get here in the first place? Like, why didn't we know about this sooner and everything? And, one of the first criticisms that gets brought up is at the very beginning of the Trump presidency, they were saying that he basically disbanded like an office. It was like a pandemic response team, basically, that he had disbanded at the beginning of his presidency. He said something like it was frivolous. It wasn't needed or whatever, and they were taking up funding, and he was gonna allocate the funding somewhere else, something like that. And essentially what happened is they were criticizing him because they think this pandemic response team would have known about this sooner or whatever, and would have been able to advise him to shut down the country even sooner than he actually did. And saying that he disbanded this office is simply not the case. The office by name does not exist anymore. Trump got rid of that. But a lot of the other key people that were part of this team in this office actually stayed. The extent of their involvement in advising Trump on the safety measures that he actually took, I'm not too sure. But saying that he just, said, like, screw pandemics, they don't exist, nothing's ever going to happen to us, or whatever, at the beginning of his presidency, it made him look a lot more irresponsible than he was actually being. And so, following that, that criticism and everything, we started to learn a little bit more about the origins of this virus, where it was coming from. I don't know if y'all ever scrolled down TikTok, but plenty of TikToks got made about the guy, some guy in a Chinese market eating bat soup, and that's how everybody started getting the virus. But what we actually ended up finding out, despite all these memes and everything all over Twitter and TikTok, was that this virus actually originated in a virology lab that China had in Wuhan. And that was another thing that everybody decided to dispute. Oh, no, it definitely came from the bat soup. There's no a virology lab. What are you talking about? And everything. And it was like, nobody believed that something like that existed. And what you need to remember is that people are always going to do, especially governments, are always going to do things that are morally wrong in order to be able to keep their power. And that's exactly what China was doing. And this is coming from somebody that has had this virus. I'm telling you, the way that it infects people, the way that it can shut down in your body so that you test negative and medical help is, not given to you when you're infected, because they can't test you for this virus or whatever. And then, a week later, it starts to literally shut down your respiratory system and slow your heart rate to the point where it starts to suffocate you to death. Like, there's absolutely no way, obviously there's no evidence that, concretely proves that it's a bioweapon, but the way that it infects people and the way that it started spreading, it begs the question. That's something that definitely could have been investigated and everything, and we may have been dealing with an entirely different shitstorm than the one that we're in right now.
Yeah, I definitely believe that if there's any way to do something evil and nefarious and get away with it and make a ton of money off of it, then there's usually somebody planning to do it. And if, you never thought of it or you don't think somebody would be that evil to do it, I mean, you're just the kind of person that would, I don't want to say turn a blind eye, but, be ignorant to what's going on. Now, obviously, you need evidence to prove these things, but, whatever happens, I mean, whether or not somebody made the virus or not, what we know is that it put the U.S. down a path of no return. I mean, the unprecedented shutdowns, the transfer of wealth from small businesses to, all these mega corporations that are the only ones that can stay open during this somehow magically, that, you don't transmit viruses by going to Walmart, I guess, I don't know. But the other thing that's set to happen is China is probably going to overtake the U.S. economy. I'm like hearing all these estimates. China's probably going to take over the U.S. economy in the next 6-7 years. And I mean, we all kind of knew it was coming in the direction that they've taken, devaluing their own currency and cheap labor and lots of exports basically because of that, that Chinese yuan going down. So who knows? But all that we know are all the negative things that have come out of it, and more specifically from the response than the actual virus itself.
And yeah, so obviously the first thing that we dealt with as Americans was the initial blowback of finding out there's a pandemic, but then also finding out that it's in the United States. So the Trump response came to shut down the borders and everything. Cities were going to start locking down. So you had major cities like Orlando, Los Angeles, New York City, Dallas, Atlanta, all these different major cities locking down and everything, trying to prevent the spread of this virus. And as initial numbers of cases started to go up in different regions of the U.S., it started to come out that it looked like New York City and California were going to be basically the big two states. Those states are massive with very, very dense populations in certain cities. You have Los Angeles, Hollywood in California, and then you have New York City, obviously. And those are going to be the two big states for big numbers of cases. And so New York and California, essentially the governors of New York and California decided that they were going to go, all out with these lockdowns. Like everybody was going to be inside and it was going to be militantly enforced. Police in the streets, curfews, like legit police states. And that was supposed to stop the spread. And what it did was their cases still managed to be, even with these extreme lockdowns and extreme safety measures in place, their case numbers managed to be the highest in the United States somehow, despite many other states that weren't projected to have very high case numbers, going very, very lax in their lockdown rules and, not enforcing a lot of safety measures that they said that they were going to enforce. All these other states should have been sky high if they were, if they weren't following all these safety measures. And the places that had the most of them were the ones that were getting infected the most. And so people start asking themselves, why am I sheltering in place? Why am I being afraid to go to the grocery store? Why am I, not leaving my house, not being a completely unproductive human being? and everything. These people had to give up going to their workplaces or whatever. Companies had to start uh, allocating money for their employees to work remotely, and they were having to reimburse employees for buying home computer setups, and if they didn't have Wi-Fi or had very very weak Wi-Fi, they were having to pay for new internet service. They're doing all these different things just to ensure that uh, that their employees could continue to work and that they could hopefully continue to stay in business through the pandemic, and you know end up spending millions of dollars on stuff that they otherwise wouldn't have had to. And then you start seeing places with these extreme lockdowns and their cases going up, and you start to wonder, like, did I do all of this for absolutely nothing? Am I, is my business about to go under for absolutely no reason? Like, could all of this have been avoided? And so, do these lockdowns actually even work? And you know to what extent, if they do work, to what extent do they need to be enforced? How tight do they need to be? Um, and then obviously, if they don't work, you have an entirely different problem.
Yeah, and I don't think they're really too concerned about the logistics or how exactly we can fund or make the world completely virus free. I mean, it's literally impossible. It's like I don't even know what to compare it to, but you can't really contain something like that, and it's almost especially a virus that has such a high survival rate of like 99.7%. What's the real point to really try to contain it rather than focus on how do we treat it and what's the how can we make ourselves naturally more immune to these things by
But
just having a better immune system?
you just brought up the survival rate, and I think that's worth touching on again, because you're talking about the survival rate, being around 99.7%. You know, the flu kills more people every year. You know, Obviously we have a vaccine for the flu, but at the same time, even with the vaccine, people are still dying in numbers that are greater than COVID. Obviously, I've personally seen that this virus does have the capability to kill, but obviously, the flu does too. And when flu season comes around every year, it's like almost a chore to go and get the flu vaccine for normal people. They either don't want to go do it, or they reluctantly go and do it and everything, and they kind of just forget about it. They go on with their normal lives. And to think that this entire shitstorm that we dealt with all of 2020 and now into 2021 was for a virus that still doesn't kill as many per year as the flu, and now it's all of a sudden a big deal. We need a vaccine now. It's killing in record numbers. We've never seen a virus like this before. Like, yes, you have. I'm sure. I guarantee you, at least one person a year, whether it's a family member, a friend, whether it's you, somebody that every single year gets the flu. And the majority of the time, I guarantee you, they've probably had the vaccine too. So, the fact that all of this came about because of a virus that most normal, healthy people, you're under 50, you exercise at least 2 days a week, if that. Like, most just normal, healthy Americans in general are not going to die from this virus, nor are they going to experience the symptoms that I experienced. And the fact that we've dealt with all these these safety measures and everything, these lockdowns and everything, and Americans are going absolutely insane in certain states, obviously, like New York and California, not being able to live their normal lives, but obviously the other Americans around the continental U.S. that are dealing with job loss, that are dealing with cut salaries, furloughs, even just complete loss of business and everything, and now they have absolutely no way to provide for their families. It's just that it's absolutely insane.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems like, and nobody really wants to talk about this, it certainly seems like people are I mean, the savings rate in the United States was already negative, so people are living beyond their means. They're spending more money than what they save and what they really make. Um, but yeah, now people are just poorer than ever. I mean, there's so many people laid off. There's so many people, not to mention, uh, with employment statistics, it won't necessarily filter out all the time what underemployment is, which is, people just getting 20, 30 hours a week instead of 40. And yeah, I mean, millions of people are projected to be going into poverty or already in poverty. There's multiple estimates out there, and it could range anywhere from a couple million to hundreds of million, depending on if you're talking about the whole world or you're talking about, the U.S. or whatever. But um, yeah, you just gotta wonder what's the real cost. If people are going to be starving and dying or displaced from their houses, is that, what's more inconvenient? Some people getting sick and dying, which, let's be honest, is going to happen pretty much every year. I mean, there's the flu, there's pneumonia, and all this other stuff. But yeah, what's the real cost? And Melinda Gates, her and Bill Gates have been a big advisor to Fauci and all that, and they're actually good friends. Uh, they admitted that they did not think through the economic impact, and it's just kind of stupid. Like, how are you even going to say that? There's no way that you can't be thinking about the economic impact. Like, it's obviously going to be huge when you have all these shutdowns and you're making everybody wait for a vaccine that has to go through the whole FDA system and multiple trials, and only a couple companies can afford to even make it to that point and have approval in the FDA system in the United States. It's just so much red tape.
Oh, and see, okay, so you brought up Fauci, and I'm glad you brought him up, because, you know, leftists like to make fun of, you know, like Republicans thinking that Trump is Jesus, and all these Dr. Fauci fan pages started popping up on Facebook and Twitter and everything. Like, people were worshiping this man's feet and everything for the advice that he was giving Americans on how to handle this pandemic and everything. And, you know, come to find out, you know, he's preaching masks and lockdowns and all this other stuff, and then people see him at a baseball game with no mask on in the stands, eating popcorn or something like that, and there are people around him and everything. So it's like the literal poster child for the COVID-19 pandemic and the government response or whatever, going and completely going back on his own advice that he was giving to the American people. But, you know, not just Fauci, you know, the government's response, you know, obviously Trump was like, okay, you know, we're going to develop a vaccine, and we're going to help millions of people. It's going to be the best vaccine ever. And, you know, says he's going to start developing this vaccine and everything. Meanwhile, there's absolutely almost no communication with the general public as to what's going on. You know, what's the timeline for this vaccine and everything. We started hearing about setbacks they were having, you know, the initial test subjects were having reactions like, okay, now we got to go back to the drawing board. So it almost seemed like it was never going to end. And the one thing that we started to see, you know, in cases that these hospitals were reporting, it was like the people that were dealing with the worst symptoms were obese Americans, or people that were overweight. You know, everybody holds their weight differently. I'm not going to say, you know, all of them were fat people, but, you know, we were finding out that it was like extremely overweight people that were dealing with the worst kind of symptoms. So, you know, keep that in mind. So you turn right around and then you close gyms. You close all the convenient places that people have, parks, you know, all these convenient places that people have to keep themselves in shape and everything. So people are now having to find alternatives to keep in their house. I know my dad texted me one day and told me that he bought like 2 or 3 jugs of milk, 1 jug to drink, and the other 2 were so that he could lift them as dumbbells, basically, and everything. So it was forcing people to come up with alternatives, and, you know, alternatives can only go so far. You know, you have to start to get more and more creative to do home workouts and stuff, unless you go to the gym regularly, in which case you're already in shape, so it's not as big of a deal to you. But for these people that were trying to get in shape and try to get to the gym regularly, suddenly had that mat pulled out from underneath them, and at that point, you lose your job, you have to stay inside, you get depressed. There's an entirely mental side to this too. People were getting depressed and killing themselves and doing a bunch of crazy stuff. And there was absolutely nothing. We heard absolutely nothing from the government about what can we do to be proactively avoiding this, other than their tyrannical safety lockdowns and that kind of thing. There was no mention that vitamin C and D were of utmost importance in keeping us safe or keeping you healthy and boosting your immune system enough that if you did get COVID, that your immune system was going to be prepared to fight it and everything. So you take away Americans' ability to, work out conveniently for the most part. You don't give them any kind of advice or, tell them what they can be doing other than these safety lockdowns to, help make their body the strongest that it could possibly be, if it were to encounter this virus and, you actually catch it. And I feel like that's something that everybody has overlooked that should be talked about.
Yeah, and you said something about people committing suicides and mental health issues. There was an interesting statistic that I saw that in Japan in October there were more suicides in just the month of October than there were COVID deaths for the entire year. So I mean, I guess they'd rather people kill themselves, and I don't even know. That's just pretty crazy to me. I mean, that if that doesn't say open it all up, I don't know what does.
And see, we're going back to the lack of cases or whatever you're talking about, how there are more suicides in Japan than cases for the entire year. So, we're over here, we're being told that this virus is killing in record numbers. There's thousands of people dying every single day. And, we started to find out from, these companies that had developed tests that, people were taking to see if they had COVID. We're finding out that these tests were more and more inaccurate. They're giving false positives. They're giving false negatives. This kind of thing. And so then, what are the true case numbers? What are the actual case numbers that all these states are actually seeing? And we started to find out that hospitals were fudging case numbers. And okay, they're fudging case numbers. Why are they doing that? Why are they saying more people have COVID than actually have it? Why are they saying that more people are dying from it than they actually were? So, guys, these hospitals, I don't know if you know how hospitals work. That's I work in healthcare as a day job, so I know a little bit about this too. Most hospitals, the way that hospitals work, despite people going there and trying to get better and trying to not be sick, hospitals at the end of the day are a business. Hospitals want to make money. Certain hospitals receive funding from the government every year to either conduct research or to buy medications to cover whatever costs the hospital needs to run that year and everything. And what we started to find out is that these hospitals that were bringing in nurses from all over the country because their cases were so high, and record numbers of people were dying, these hospitals were fudging their cases because they were getting money. They were getting extra money from the government for their COVID cases. So was whatever proportion, however many 100,000 cases you had or whatever, you got X amount of money. I think it was like it wasn't some stupid high number, but it was high enough that if you had, a decent amount of cases, you stood to make quite a bit of money. And so that now puts motivation behind fudging case numbers, because the more cases you have, the more money that the government is going to hand you. And so these hospitals knew that they could make a killing, I hate to use that word when talking about a hospital, but make a killing fudging their cases or whatever, and just letting the government hand them money. There was even I heard somebody talking about it. I think I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about how hospitals would get even more money if they had patients on ventilators, and so they were more inclined to put patients on ventilators that maybe otherwise wouldn't have needed them or whatever. And now in the last couple of weeks, they're finding out that ventilators are bad, and ventilators are more than likely causing people to die rather than helping them. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. The fact that they're even doing that, and then turning around and acting like they're so concerned about our well-being, and trying to lie to us about how many of our friends and family are actually sick. I think that's just crazy.
Yeah, you spoke a little bit about the testing and how, some of the tests came out and, they would produce false positives or, false negatives or whatever. I mean, apparently PCR tests, just historically speaking, they've been always known to produce false positives. Well, not always, but, at an alarming rate. So, I mean, I don't really think it's a coincidence that a lot of these places were really trying to promote using PCR testing in the beginning. Yeah. Also, going back to, the hospitals misquoting cases and saying they're coronavirus or whatever. About a month or two ago, in November, December 2020, the CDC came out and they basically said that all pneumonia, influenza, and COVID cases would be measured under one number that the CDC would put out. And that's what they call a PIC designation. God. So that just kind of makes me wonder, I mean, how long has this actually been going on? And have these hospitals been abiding by PIC designation? Because there's a lot of people who just die of pneumonia or influenza, the flu, every year. And it's like, another thing that I heard is we have basically no flu cases. It's like, what are you trying to tell me? Like, what the hell? Like, literally, if you took the flu and how many people get it every year, and you just reclassified it as COVID, you would probably have the same amount of cases. I mean, slightly different symptoms, give or take. I mean, some people have completely different symptoms than others. I mean, you look up COVID symptoms, and there's like 20 different things that you may or may not have.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like you can't get normal sick anymore. If you cough in public, people are going to look at you and be like, oh, that guy has COVID. Like, I can't sneeze anymore. Like, I swear, I have to cover up my sneezes when if I go out to a restaurant now or something like that, especially during the daytime. I don't know what it is about, like, being out in the sun, but if I get out of my car or whatever, I tend to sneeze if I'm like underneath direct sunlight. I don't know why, but I'm weird. But I have to cover my sneezes, and it's like, normal people, when they would sneeze in public or whatever, try to cover it with a cough or something like that, and would try to like keep themselves from sneezing as loud. And people can't even do that anymore, because if you sneeze or cough in public, everybody's going to think that you have COVID. You can't get normal sick anymore. It's like the flu. When COVID came into existence, the flu stopped existing. Pneumonia stopped existing. What was it? What was the pandemic under Obama? Swine flu. Swine flu stopped existing. All these different things that people get and die from every single year just stopped existing. It was just all COVID. And so now to preach COVID all year and then come back right at the end of the year and say, oh no, now we're going to put all these COVID cases and deaths and all these other statistics, we're just going to classify them under virus. They're no longer going to be classified in separate entities. It is just absolutely stupid.
Yeah, and it really seems to be the only disease nowadays. I mean, I don't know the last time I've heard of somebody just getting a cold. I mean, I certainly haven't had one this year at all, and I don't know if it's because I've been staying inside a lot or whatever. But I mean, I certainly don't think that number one, the masks are really. I mean, they can do something. You could believe they do something, whether or not. I mean, but there's still a little bit of air that comes out every time. So you're not gonna eliminate everything. It just doesn't make sense. And people are thinking that they get this cloth mask that they made out of an old shirt, and they think it's like some sort of magic filter or something. It's absolutely insane. And Rand Paul said something about how those cloth masks are only like 3% effective at blocking actual virus particles. Like 3% of viruses is what they can block. And I have a friend who's studying nursing, and he basically said, hey, like, I mean, even if you're wearing an N95, if it's not the correct size N95, or if you have any sort of facial hair, if you're a guy or whatever, I mean, there's just little small ways for air to circumvent around. It's just, I mean, Rand Paul also said something about how N95s are only like 50% effective. I mean, come in and correct me if you want. But, and the surgical masks are a little more effective than the cloth masks. And it's just like, what's the point? It's just kind of all pointless. They say to do all these things, but nothing changes ever.
So, you're talking about masks and everything. And when places started to open back up and let people start to go out to eat again, start to sort of live their normal lives, somewhat. Obviously there's still safety measures in place. At least the masks were a temporary solution and everything. Like I said, I coming out of the hospital and recovering, I was one of those guys, wear the mask. If you go out in public, like, that guy's irresponsible, he's not wearing his mask. But to me, I also, as a libertarian, recognize that people have the ability to make choices for themselves. And as much as I would like everybody to do the responsible thing or whatever, or try to have somebody else's well-being in mind while being out in public, they shouldn't have to. Like, it's not. I certainly don't leave the house every day and think about the guy down the street and like how my decisions are going to affect how his day goes or whatever. Like, nobody needs to be worrying about that. But that's exactly the attitude that leftists started to adopt coming out of these lockdowns. At least New York and California are exempted from that. From my understanding, they're still under lockdown right now. But everybody else that was going out and everything, people are calling government officials, calling police on their neighbors or whatever. If their neighbor has a gathering of 6 people at their house or whatever, oh, they're not socially distancing, they're not wearing masks inside their house. I'm looking through their window right now. Oh, I broke into their house, I can see them. I'm standing in their kitchen. They're not wearing masks. Like, just absolute violation of, number one, people's privacy, but number two, just people's rights. And they're starting to that's starting to get way out of hand. Like, at what point do you take matters into your own hands, like as an everyday citizen or whatever? Like these people, people started to call them the mask police. You know, it's just stupid. I don't understand why people have to act like this and think that it's absolutely within their rights and it's so okay to go and enforce what you think on a mass group of people. And then you act surprised when they get mad at you and they do the exact opposite of what you tell them to do. I don't know about you, but when somebody tells me to do something or orders me to do it, unless it's somebody that like I respect and admire or whatever, like if some random dude comes up to me on the street and says, "I don't like your shirt, you should change it," like I'm not gonna go home and change my shirt. Screw him. Like it's just trying to change somebody's line of thinking or whatever. I don't know is the right way to put it, but they weren't even trying to change it. They were just demanding that people do what they say to do, and you can't do that when you have individual liberty and individual freedom guaranteed to you by this country. You can't go around and just demand everybody do what you want and fold to your demands, and if you don't, you're a racist, you're a bigot. Screw you. Yeah, screw you. We want you to die. I hope you get shot. Like that. And those are the kinds of things that people were saying. That's what people were tweeting addresses of people who don't wear masks and saying, "Yo, like let's go run up. Like let's go rob this guy." Like just for not wearing a mask. It's stupid.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of the typical leftist response to anything that they don't like is just, I don't like it, so ban it or enforce it or whatever. And it's kind of ironic because
Talk about ban. Trump officially banned from Twitter today.
officially or just suspended for a little.
No, his account's gone. All of his tweets are gone. His profile photo's gone. It's gone.
R.I.P. T-Dog. So yeah, I mean, just most of these leftists, like their solution is always to call in the state, to call in coercion and power, and have the police, have laws changed to have the police go, do stuff at their directive. And it's just, I mean, I saw somebody on social media today. So Publix is a big supermarket down here in Florida, and just somebody on social media saying our local Publix that they saw somebody in the store without a mask, but nobody was doing anything. Nobody was kicking them out. I mean, first of all, you don't know if they have a medical condition to where their breathing is severely inhibited by wearing a mask. I mean, even me, a healthy person in my 20s, I have a tough time wearing a mask for a certain amount of minutes. I mean, I'm glad that I don't have to wear one for 8 hours a day straight, luckily, but later it comes out that, yeah, I mean, in that Publix store that you're supposed to be wearing a mask, and that's their rule, and that's the county guideline. But I mean, odds are, one, this lady definitely did not go up to somebody and say, "Hey, you need to put on a mask." They just want somebody else to do it for them. And I bet that she didn't even go to the store manager either to talk to them. They just want to sit there on their couch and complain on social media and virtue signal about how great they are that they wear a mask and how terrible this other guy is because, he's not wearing one for whatever reason. I mean, if you think that he's really just being a jackass and not wearing one, why don't you go up to him yourself? I mean, it's just, these people are literal pussies, and it's so annoying because they just want, to control everybody else with the government, but they want the government to control them too. It's like they think Fauci, like you were saying earlier, like they think Fauci is God. They think everything he says is true, regardless of how many times that he's flip-flopped on his own things like masks. And the CDC has messed up with, they came out with the first tests, and the tests were all messed up, and they had to rely on private companies. It's just, and the PIC designation. Yeah, and the free market ended up providing. And, you know, it's just wild that people are resorting to these almost North Korea type tactics of, you know, tell on your neighbor because it makes you look good and better in the society, in the eyes of the state.
You're talking about, you know, North Korea and how these tactics are similar and everything. Well, what does North Korea use? North Korea uses their police force to enforce all these rules and everything. What did everybody start calling these people that were calling the cops on their neighbors or whatever? They're calling them the mask police and everything. And so these people tattletaling literally on their neighbors or whatever for not wearing masks are now essentially trying to carry out the government's orders for them. And so a very good example of this is the movie V for Vendetta. I know we were talking about this earlier, and you said that you hadn't watched it yet, but V for Vendetta is a very, very good movie. If you have seen it, you know V for Vendetta is about Guy Fawkes Day, why that exists today, and the backstory behind the gunpowder treason plot in England. And the movie is basically set in this police state type society, where there's a secret police walking around enforcing curfews. You can only go to work and that's it. If they catch you talking to people, you're in trouble. You know, if they catch you not following what they tell you to do, you're getting prosecuted. You're getting thrown in a gulag or a jail, and everything. And it's very scary how similar that movie is to what's going on even right now, with the way that people act towards one another, the way that we are so quick to cannibalize other Americans and cannibalize our neighbors, to kiss ass to the government. And it's stupid to think that after all this time, you know, just recently we were talking about these stimulus checks and everything. Everybody was all up in arms, and it was universally agreed upon by literally everybody. I'm talking libertarians, conservatives, Democrats. Everybody was like, these $2,000 checks need to happen. Americans are hurting. We need money. We need a lifeline and everything. I don't know a single person that was against these stimulus checks. And what do we get? We get $600. We get $600, and me, like some other people, had our money deposited to H&R Block or TurboTax, whoever we filed our taxes with in 2019, or whatever. That's who got our money first, and it delayed the deposit by about 3 or 4 days, which is sad. So you're talking about a government that can't even do that. They can't even give you that. They can't give you $2,000 of your own money, mind you, of money that was taken from you in taxes. They can't even give you that. And it's stupid. And the fact that people are still willing to say that the same government that failed to give us $2,000 stimulus checks or whatever, Nancy Pelosi called it substantial. What an idiot she is. Nancy Pelosi called it substantial. Meanwhile, people are out of work, people are starving, and all this other stuff because of what the government has done to us through this pandemic, and they couldn't even do that right. And so now, what do you think is going to happen? Why are you still kissing their asses and saying that, you know, we need to do what they say? You know, you need to wear a mask. You need to. Dr. Fauci said this, like, and it's like you're doing the exact same thing. You were just complaining that they couldn't even get you get a stimulus check right, and now you're turning around and doing exactly what they tell you to do. and you're going to police your neighbors for not doing it. And it's like, you start to ask questions like, why are we even doing this? Why do these lockdowns continue? Why do these mask mandates continue? Why are we doing all of this stuff for a government that does not care about us?
Yeah, I mean, I guess everybody for their own personal reasons just wanted the stimulus check, but, as a libertarian and, anybody who really pays attention to economics, I guess you got to be concerned about the rise of the national debt. And, I mean, at this point, it's just so irreversible. Trump put more, debt on top than Obama did in all of his 8 years. And, obviously, the coronavirus response was a big part of that, but
keep in mind when I said libertarians, the Libertarian Party is what I'm talking about. The Libertarian Party and actual libertarians are two very, very distinct and different things. I want people to understand that to the fullest extent that they can.
Yeah, we should definitely have an episode regarding that because, the big L libertarians, the Libertarian Party, definitely does not represent a lot of people. I know it does not represent me, and I definitely did not vote for them this time or even the last time. But, yeah, I mean, $2,000. I mean, even if you gave Americans, mind you, we ended up getting $600 and, however else much, tax money that we, put into this fund, to this government, however much we paid in taxes that we didn't get back, that was $600. I mean, that was all going to foreign aid and all these like foreign arts
you
programs.
Talk about it's just like a record amount of money for a bill and everything. And even I criticize AOC a lot. I criticize Ilhan Omar a lot. Pelosi, all these other people, but AOC tweeted or whatever, she finally tweeted out something that I actually agreed with. She's sitting there saying, this bill is like over 5,000 pages long, and the Democratic, what the Democrats did? The Democrats voted against a rule that is typically enforced in Congress where a bill has to be read before it's signed. And they voted to suspend the rule. And essentially what that did was this bill shows up on people's desks whatever morning it was and everything. It's 5,000 something pages long, and they say, we're voting on it tonight. You have absolutely no choice. And AOC's tweeting, how is it possible that we get this 5,000 page bill or whatever, and we have absolutely no time to read it, now we have to vote on it tonight, and all this other stuff or whatever, which, I agree with. It's absolutely ridiculous that they had to do that. More importantly, that of course it's AOC's own party that suspended the rule that made that possible. But the fact that she recognized that there is something wrong with that, that's a step in the right direction. But then now you start to talk about, okay, yeah, like that is wrong. They should have time to read it and everything. But what did AOC turn around and do? Okay, yeah, she didn't. We don't have time to look at the bill. I'm gonna sign it anyway. What the hell, I don't understand how you're going to sit there and complain that you have absolutely no time to read a bill and then you go and turn around and sign it. It makes no sense whatsoever as to why she did that. And then after signing said bill that hands out money like it's grown on trees and like it's candy to all these foreign countries, and Americans get $600 and everything, she turns right back around, goes right back to her Twitter page, and starts criticizing, I can't believe our government only got our citizens $600 or whatever. Like it's a sham. Like they should be getting $2,000 or whatever. And it's sad. It's very, very, very sad.
Yeah, and that's ironic because Trump was the one that was actually really pushing for the $2,000, and he was, he sent that bill back to Congress, I'm pretty sure, but eventually they just they can't compromise, or they compromise too much. I mean, that's the issue, is they compromise on too much, and everything that war gets paid for, and all these programs, this welfare, all this garbage gets paid for, but we can't pay for or we can't give people back their money.
And see, the other thing too is that they were and by they I mean the left. The left was criticizing Trump, saying, after this first stimulus check went out, it was only $1,200. Obviously, that's $600 more than what we got this time around. But they're criticizing Trump, saying, well, how come you didn't send more money? How come that $1,200 check is the only check that came? Trump literally said, after he sent the first check out, I want a second stimulus check immediately. I want to send out a second $1,200 check within the next month. Like, that was what Trump wanted to do. And guess who stopped him from doing it? Nancy Pelosi. She stalled Congress not once, not twice, but 3 times. She stalled Congress from sending out $1,200 stimulus checks, and then has the audacity to come back at the very end of the year and stand up behind her stupid little podium and say, guys, $600 is a substantial gain for Americans. Most of my friends can't even pay rent with $600. I don't know what you can do with that. I mean, I guarantee you most of my friends are going to go out and buy a gun, or go out and buy, some frivolous item that they otherwise wouldn't be able to afford because they're too busy drowning in bills or whatever, but they want to make themselves feel bad or feel better or whatever at the government's expense because of what they've done to them. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. Your path to income is taken away for a lot of people, but they say, oh no, we'll take care of you, and you get a welfare check, or I mean, the stimulus, it's like, I mean, what if you're underemployed, or you make a little more than that? I mean, they're just going to give you $1,800, the $1,200 plus the $600, and tell you to fuck off. It's like, it pretty much is fuck off money. I mean, moving on from people to businesses, I mean, businesses are just as important as, the people. I mean, the businesses employ the people, and the businesses serve the people. And, the government did the same kind of thing with the payment protection plan loans. It's just kind of money to say, pay your employees or whatever. And this is a loan, they disguise it as a loan, but they said that, if you paid your employees and you jump through all the hoops that they set, that you don't have to pay it back. So what it really is not a loan, it's a bailout or a grant. And it's just kind of concerning that they're taking away their path of revenue by.
And how exactly are said bailouts funded?
Yeah, exactly, and they're funded by you. People think it's some.
They're giving you your own money back to bail yourself out. You heard that correctly.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense. It's just taking money from one pocket to another, and the government doesn't really. It doesn't save money for a rainy day. I mean, at the peak of the economy.
It's like, have you ever seen that episode of Rick and Morty? And it's like, you're giving me my own money with extra steps.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think Rick and Morty's kind of cringy, but they got some good points every once in a while. But yeah, I mean, they're giving you your own money with extra steps. I mean, and that slows down the economy too, and it creates distortions in investment and spending. And just from my finance background, like you can look at these things, and you can look at the history of investments, and see when the misallocations happen, and it's when there's a lot of government spending and when there's low interest rates. It's people that shouldn't be spending the money getting the money, really.
I hate to harp on this topic or whatever and go back to the anti-maskers, but I want to, because there's an irony that we missed in there that I think is very important, especially Republicans or Trump supporters stormed the Capitol 2 days ago to to protest the electoral college certification for Joe Biden and everything. And I think we're gonna do another episode on that maybe next. But you know, when we're talking about the mask police and everything, these same people who are calling the police on their neighbors for not wearing masks are the same people that decided to join in these BLM protests that happened, after the death of George Floyd and everything in the middle of 2020. These same mask police are now amassed in the streets, looting businesses, destroying private property, shooting at people, beating people up, doing all these crazy things, not socially distancing, not wearing masks, not following any of these safety guidelines that they were calling the police on their neighbor about 2 weeks before. Not doing any of that. That's out the window now. Now it's, I get to burn my neighbor's house down because he's not black. I get to loot this business because the owner's a Chinese guy. And everything, and then people are criticizing business owners for defending their property. I've seen videos on Twitter or whatever of these people running away because there's a guy on the rooftop of his business watching people crowd in the parking lot getting ready to try and run up in his place of work and everything. He's sitting on the rooftop with an AR-15 shooting at him and everything, trying to keep him away from the door and everything. And he's the one getting criticized. He's the one getting ostracized on Twitter and ripped apart in comment sections for defending his own property because Black Lives Matter. Because everybody should everybody should support this movement and everything. Property rights are out the window. Individual freedoms are out the window. Safety guidelines are out the window and everything. But then as soon as these protests went away, as soon as, it stopped trending on Twitter and people stopped giving it as much attention and everything, they turned right back around and started criticizing people for not wearing masks again. Like, what did you just do for 6 months? You just rioted in the streets and practically destroyed cities.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of unfair to lump in, the mask police with the BLM crowd, but certainly the establishment opinion, that of the mainstream media certainly did not do anything to really criticize them for not social distancing or in some cases not wearing masks. I mean, a lot of them wore masks, and it's kind of convenient for them because they were probably committing crimes too. I mean, obviously not all of them, but some of them. There's videos of people just breaking into places, and I mean, it's just kind of crazy because, going back to people defending their own businesses. I mean, one thing that right-wingers have really woken up to with this issue and just recently, what went on at the Capitol building, January 6th, is that cops aren't defending the people. I mean, they're creating a barrier. They're defending Antifa or whatever, and they're turning a blind eye whenever these businesses are getting broken into. And it's like, that's kind of their point, is to defend people and property. And it's just waking a lot of right-wingers up to, what are their priorities? Do they care about themselves and what makes them more comfortable? Or are they just trying to collect their pension, at the end of so many years?
And see, this is where I think BLM had a point during this entire pandemic. As much as I disagree with the looting, I disagree with the means to the end, I think BLM had a point with their gripes with the police. And what I mean by that is that, I don't care if you're a normal everyday guy or if, your job is to go out and be a police officer. Because you wear a badge, it does not give you the right to beat up on people, and to use excessive force and to violate people's rights or whatever, because you have some sick power trip, or because you think the badge gives you a right to. And I think with George Chauvin,
Derek Chauvin,
or Derek Chauvin and George Floyd, excuse me. I think that BLM originally had it right, and pretty much every single person I knew agreed with that. Everybody watched that video of Chauvin kneeling on the neck of George Floyd, and I don't know a single person that disagreed with that and said, "Oh, that's a good cop." You can even go and ask cops. Go and ask most cops, and they'll be like, "Oh, nah, I don't like that guy," or whatever, or that wasn't right, and everything. And BLM had the world stage, to make a case in point against the police, and they absolutely obliterated any chance that they had to get some sort of positive message, and some sort of structured plan or whatever. The government was at the negotiating table, and they decided to completely obliterate it by going and looting businesses, going and killing people, and destroying property, burning cities. They decided to completely obliterate it by doing that, and then complain when people bring up the fact that they did it.
And it might just be the time I grew up in, or like the city or whatever, but myself included, literally everybody. People that say they aren't racist will make people that go around calling people racist all the time will make racist comments or have racist thoughts. It's just stereotypes, and it's just something how the human brain is wired. But I don't know if it's the time I grew up in or what, but I knew from a very young age that you're not supposed to, you're not supposed to treat people differently by the color of their skin, basically. And, like MLK said, judge them on their actions. But people are shoving BLM in people's faces, and just because you deny or don't subscribe to the movement or whatever, they're saying that you're automatically racist. And if somebody put a gun to my head and said, "Do Black Lives Matter?" Even if they didn't put a gun to my head, I would say yes. It's just kind of like.
But that's essentially what they're doing metaphorically now. Is they're putting the metaphorical gun to your head and saying, if you don't support this movement, you're an enemy of people of color. You're a racist. You're, if you disagree with the Black Lives Matter movement on Twitter, especially, if somebody decides to reply to you and smear you, it's going to go absolutely viral on Twitter. I saw one guy or whatever who replied to a BLM tweet, or whatever, disagreeing with whatever the tweet was and everything, and he got absolutely blown up. And I'm talking ratioed to the maximum. And these people were ludicrous enough to go and find the guy's place of work, call his boss, say, "Hey, this employee of yours doesn't like Black Lives Matter. Oh, I can't have a racist working for me," and it went and fired the guy. So solely because he expressed that he didn't agree with BLM being a movement, gets his Twitter account suspended. He's now unemployed. I'm amazed he even kept his job through the pandemic, but was employed at the time, but was no longer employed thanks to Twitter. It's just this cancel culture of ruining people's lives because they don't agree with you. We brought up the fact that Trump just got banned from Twitter earlier. It's the same kind of thing. What world do we live in now where we can ban the president of the United States? I don't care if he has 2 weeks left. Where we can ban the president of the United States from a social media platform because there are idiots in this country that don't agree with him.
Yeah, it's all just kind of a control thing at the end of the day.
I think we kind of got away from what we were talking about, though. We brought up them not wearing masks during these protests, but we're kind of getting towards the end of our podcast, and we kind of wanted to end with at what point does this all end? Does this end at 0 people infected? Does this end when case numbers still exist, but they're not increasing day by day, or they're not increasing in record numbers? Does this end when everybody gets vaccinated? We already have the vaccine, but there's many people saying they're not going to take it. They don't trust that this vaccine actually works. There's rumors now of all these different side effects that happen when you take it. I don't know how many of those are factual and how many of those are just made up rumors. But at what point does this pandemic end? Does it end with the vaccine? Does it end with herd immunity? Do we have to get net 0 cases? When do we get our normal lives back?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, people keep saying the new normal, as if this is just like a given. This is going to last for a long time. And I think it will. I mean, it'll last as long as people let it last. The government and, whoever is just going to fudge numbers or create some sort of crisis that we all need to band together and just give up our normal lives for. And, we just, as people, me politically, but, just as people in their personal lives, just acting as libertarians, almost just wanting to be left alone and do their own thing. I mean, when does it end? The government just gets more control year after year, and you never get your freedoms back, and you never get your money back. It's already gone. It's already spent. I mean, we got massive national debt, and Social Security's money's already spent. We're issuing debt now to get the money for Social Security all the way down the road, basically, and we're gonna have to pay it back all the way down the road. But yeah, I mean, everything's just ratcheting up. This is a big turning point. The Biden getting into office, I don't see any of it ending soon. So, yeah, I think 2021 might be worse than 2020, but we'll see how it pans out. And
God, I hope you're wrong.
Yeah, I hope I'm wrong as well. So, we'll see how it pans out, and we'll definitely give some more updates as to how it's going, and hopefully have a 2021 recap as well.
Yep.
All right, guys, thanks for listening. I know it's a long one, but peace.